Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC Vegas 63, and in the main event, we have Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this amazing featherweight matchup. And guys, I'm always honest with you about these UFC fight cards. I know some people will lie to you and fake enthusiasm and pretend it's a great fight card, and there's sneaky great fights on this card. UFC Vegas 63 is a shit stain of a fight card. I absolutely love this main event. This is a very notable featherweight fight, but the card leaves a lot to be desired. I'm not particularly pumped for it, but I am excited for this main event. This is a very meaningful fight within the featherweight division. You have two guys ranked in the top 10, and had Calvin Kattar's last fight went his way, which I believe it should have, which we'll talk about in a second, this could easily be a #1 contender fight in the UFC featherweight division. And I believe whoever wins this fight regardless, depending on what happens with Volk moving up to 155, and we'll have to see how that all plays out, I think the winner of this fight's like one win away from a UFC featherweight title shot, depending on how the division plays out. So this is a very important fight. Both guys are elite level fighters. Both guys are super well-rounded. And I think this is a very hard fight to predict. But we'll get to that in a second. If you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Calvin Kattar, who's 23-6. You have Arnold Allen, who's 18-1. Kattar is ranked number 5. Allen is ranked number 6 in the UFC official rankings. Kattar is 34 years old. Allen is 28 years old. Kattar is 5'11". Allen is 5'8". Kattar has a 72-inch reach, and Allen has a 70-inch reach. So a 2-inch reach advantage for Calvin Kattar, as well as a 3-inch height advantage for Calvin Kattar as well. So if you look at Arnold Allen, he's 18-1. He comes into this fight undefeated in the UFC. Of those 18 wins in his pro MMA career, he has 6 wins by knockout, 4 by submission, and 8 by decision. Of his 1 losses, he has 1 loss via decision, and that's all the way back in 2014. You know, I mean, that's not even the same fighter, and that's outside the UFC as well. You look at his last fight, he defeated Dan Hooker in March of this year, and this is probably his best win on his entire resume, but it kind of comes with a bit of an asterisk. You know, Dan Hooker on a losing streak, going down to 145 pounds, which he said was a mistake, cutting all that weight, trying to get down to featherweight. And this was a crazy fight while it lasted. A majority went Arnold Allen's way. He rocked him early badly. Dan Hooker was pressing him. He got rocked. Arnold Allen went for the kill. He went absolutely berserk, swinging wild haymakers. He gets clipped by Dan Hooker, gets hurt badly, but he continues to just press on. And then he realizes, I'm not getting the finish right here. So then he kind of takes a step back, and he goes back to fighting a normal fight and not in absolute kill mode. And then he catches Dan Hooker again, hurts him badly with a punch, lands a head kick right afterwards, and then swarms him again, eventually, you know, pinning him up against the cage and landing nasty standing elbows to finish the fight. Got a standing TKO over Dan Hooker. Referee finally jumps in the first round. And this was a solid win, and he looked good against a guy like Dan Hooker. But again, it's Dan Hooker cutting weight down to 145 pounds. And, you know, coming off a couple losses and a war against Dustin Poirier not that long ago, you know. So it's kind of a diminished win, but a decent win nonetheless. The last fight before that was against Sodiq Yusuff. He won via unanimous decision. This was April in 2021. You know, not the most exciting fight, but Arnold Allen did outstrike Sodiq Yusuff in this fight, and he did drop Sodiq Yusuff in this fight. And that's a quality win. Sodiq Yusuff is a very good fighter, an up-and-coming guy. And Arnold Allen was able to beat him and even drop him in this fight. The fight before that against Nick Lentz, outstruck Nick Lentz. And the story of Arnold Allen's fights, for the majority of them, is just Arnold Allen being super well-rounded, bouncing around on his feet, good footwork, and then he just lands these powerful shots in his combinations, and he's just always ahead of his opponent. He did that to Nick Lentz, and then before that, he beat a legend in Gilbert Melendez back at UFC 239, July of 2019. This was when most people started to realize Arnold Allen was a decent fighter, but Gilbert Melendez at this point, you know, it really was meaningless in my opinion. Gilbert Melendez was just falling off a cliff. I believe this was right after he got caught for PEDs and suspended for a bit. So, you know, take from it what you will. Also, this was back in 2019, so we're over 2 years past this fight. But still, Arnold Allen went out there and outstruck a legend like Gilbert Melendez. And then, really, it isn't worth talking about all these other fights. You're getting back to 2018 and 2017 and 2016. One thing I did want to mention about Arnold Allen and his UFC resume, it's not the greatest resume. He is super inactive. You look at him, he fought once in 2015, once in 2016, once in 2017, once in 2018, twice in 2019, then once in 2020, once in 2021, and once in 2022 so far. So he will fight twice in 2022. He's not going to fight again after this October fight. So Arnold Allen, not super active, typically fighting once a year. So take from that what you will. Moving over to Calvin Kattar, he has 23 pro MMA wins. Of those 23 wins, 11 by knockout, 2 by submission, 10 by decision. Of those 6 losses, he's lost 0 by knockout, never been knocked out, 1 by submission, and 5 by decision. In his last fight, it was in June of this year, he lost to Josh Emmett via split decision. And this was a fight I had Calvin Kattar winning. I don't think it was an outright robbery. The first 3 rounds were very close, but Calvin Kattar definitely won rounds 4 and 5. And, I really think Calvin Kattar should have got this decision. Josh Emmett won this fight. He was getting outstruck the majority of the fight. He won this fight on the judges' scorecards by having late flurries the last minute of each round where he was landing primarily on the forearms of Calvin Kattar. He wasn't able to out-wrestle Calvin Kattar, wasn't able to do a whole lot of damage, but just swinging and throwing volume and landing on the forearms of Calvin Kattar, ending the round, each round, basically got him this win. Calvin Kattar was landing nasty jabs in this fight. His striking looked phenomenal, but unfortunately he doesn't get the win. The reason I said it wasn't an outright robbery, the first 3 rounds were very close. So, you could give one of those rounds, you could give all 3 of those rounds to Josh Emmett, and that's what I believe one judge gave it to Josh Emmett on the first 3 rounds. But there was one judge that gave round 4 to Josh Emmett, which was one of the deciding rounds. And there's no way Josh Emmett won the 4th round. So, despicable scorecard. I think it was Chris Lee, actually. So, in my opinion, Calvin Kattar should have won this fight. And he should be on a 2-fight winning streak instead of on a 1-fight losing streak. And Josh Emmett's considered like the number 1 contender right now in the division. But I thought he lost his last fight. The fight before that was against Giga Chikadze in January of this year. This was a phenomenal win for Calvin Kattar. Giga Chikadze started pretty good, and I picked Giga Chikadze to win this fight. I think he slipped in the first round. Calvin Kattar ended up on top of him, beat him up a little bit, wore on him. And then, as the fight went on, Calvin Kattar's pressure was just unreal. And Giga Chikadze just had a hard time dealing with the pressure of Calvin Kattar. I actually thought Calvin Kattar was going to get a late round stoppage. Giga Chikadze was able to survive, and Calvin Kattar wins via decision. But honestly, I was very high on Giga. I think a lot of people picked Giga in this fight. And to watch Calvin Kattar go out there and put the pressure on him that he did and land the shots that he did, very impressive. And before that, there was a long layoff, a year layoff, after getting absolutely wrecked by Max Holloway. That's a fight, that Calvin Kattar just got picked apart. There should have been a doctor stoppage at some point. The referee should have stopped it at some point. Max Holloway just landed so many combinations on Calvin Kattar and just beat the living dog shit out of Calvin Kattar in this fight. I'm glad he took a year off after this. Honestly, I was thinking he should have took longer than that. But that's not a terrible loss to have. Max Holloway, one of the greatest 145-pounders in the world, on the GOAT list at featherweight. So not a terrible loss to have. Before that, he has wins over Dan Ige. And then before that was a win over Jeremy Stephens, where he landed that nasty standing elbow and KO'd Jeremy Stephens. It was absolutely brutal. It's in the second round. And then the other fight I want to talk about, he has a loss to Zabit Magomedsharipov. This was a fight where Calvin Kattar lost the first 2 rounds. And then the 3rd round, Calvin Kattar started to come back and win. And had this been a 5-round fight, this was a main event, but it was not 5 rounds. I can't remember the reason it wasn't 5 rounds. I 100% believe Calvin Kattar would have defeated Zabit Magomedsharipov, who's a very good fighter, but he was gassing in the 3rd round, and Calvin Kattar has excellent stamina. So I believe he would have won this fight had it been 5 rounds. And then you're starting getting back to Ricardo Lamas back in 2019, who has a KO win over. But you're getting years back in the past now. I think those are all the notable fights worth talking about. When I look at this matchup between Calvin Kattar and Arnold Allen, I see 2 very well-rounded fighters. I see both guys who are primarily strikers. I see both guys who have never been knocked out. And I think you look at past the victory for both guys. And I think the most likely path to victory for Calvin Kattar would most likely be decision. For Arnold Allen, we've never seen him go 5 rounds. So I think the most likely path to victory for Arnold Allen would probably be by TKO. But it's hard to imagine a guy like Calvin Kattar getting finished. He's so durable. I know he's taken a lot of damage over the course of his career, particularly in that Max Holloway fight. But, he's so durable. I have a hard time believing Arnold Allen's going to finish him that way. Arnold Allen does have some submissions on the resume, but he's not out there, submitting guys left and right. And Calvin Kattar's only been submitted once in his entire MMA career, and that was all the way back in 2008. So I don't think it's highly likely that Calvin Kattar is going to be submitted by Arnold Allen. So, if I was going to pick Arnold Allen, I'd pick him by KO. If I'm going to pick Calvin Kattar, I would pick him by decision. I think those are the most likely ways each guy win. But who knows? Arnold Allen could also surprise us. And, he's looked very good. We've never seen him go 5 rounds. We've seen him go 3 rounds. Arnold Allen could potentially win by decision as well. But, I just, without the support of seeing him go 5 rounds, it's hard for me to believe that. And that's why when I look at this fight and I see those paths to victory and I look about how durable Calvin Kattar is, I am going to go, my official prediction is Calvin Kattar via decision. I think this is a fight that could go either way. I think this is a fight that's very hard to predict. I think this is a fight where both guys are very well-rounded, but I don't think either guy is going to try to wrestle. And even if they were, I don't see them being super successful. Calvin Kattar has very good takedown defense. He has very good anti-wrestling. Same for Arnold Allen. We've never really seen a fight where he's just been taken down and dominated on the ground. So I don't really see either guy doing that. I think this is going to be a striking match. And I think what this comes down to is the power and speed of Arnold Allen versus the technical striking ability of Calvin Kattar. And the way I see this fight going, I could see Arnold Allen winning that first round. I could maybe even see Arnold Allen winning that second round. Arnold Allen is very fast, and he finds a way to just clip guys. And I know eventually a guy like Calvin Kattar, who's taken a lot of accumulated damage over the course of his UFC career, eventually that chin's going to shut off. But I don't think it's going to be against Arnold Allen. I mean, Arnold Allen in the UFC only has 1 win by knockout, and it's against a malnourished Dan Hooker. And I'm not trying to take that away from him, but I don't see him knocking out a guy like Calvin Kattar, who is so durable, took shots off of Josh Emmett. I know a lot of them hit his forearms, but took shots off Josh Emmett. I don't think Arnold Allen's going to go out there and finish him. I think this could be a fight where, maybe Calvin Kattar loses the first 2 rounds and Arnold Allen lands some good shots and bust up Calvin Kattar. But in that 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, I think the technical boxing ability of Calvin Kattar is going to come through along with the stamina. We've seen Calvin Kattar go a hard 5 rounds. We've seen him go a hard 5 rounds against Giga Chikadze. We've seen him go a hard 5 rounds against Josh Emmett in his last fight. He went 5 rounds against Max Holloway where he absolutely took a beating. Okay, so we've seen him go 5 rounds where he's super, durable. He has good stamina. And I think Arnold Allen has to get him out of there early, or I think Calvin Kattar is going to come back in the later rounds. I think he's a little bit more technical in the striking. I think that, Arnold Allen is a very good striker himself and does have a decent variety of attacks, but both guys primarily like to use punches. They're not mixing in a whole lot of kicks. They do mix them in, but it's just not like they're super kick heavy. They heavily rely on their boxing, and I think the boxing of Calvin Kattar is just a bit better than the boxing of Arnold Allen, so I think he's going to have to rely on his power, and if he can't get Calvin Kattar out of there early, I think Calvin Kattar is going to be able to just pick him apart and land the better shots in the later rounds and eventually win a decision. I could see like 3-2 for Calvin Kattar via decision. I could also see 4-1. Maybe Arnold Allen catches him in 1 round, rocks him, looks for the finish, kind of gets tired, and then Calvin Kattar kind of slowly takes over from there. I could also, and I debated about making this prediction as well, I could see Calvin Kattar getting like a 4th round TKO or maybe even a 5th round TKO. But I'm going to go with Calvin Kattar via decision. I just think he's a little bit more technical striker. I think he has to weather a storm or 2 from Arnold Allen in the first 2 rounds. But after that, I think Calvin Kattar is going to start taking over, pumping the jab, teep kicks to the body. I think he's going to be chopping the legs. Calvin Kattar started mixing in those leg kicks in his last few fights, which you love to see when guys start mixing in the variety of attacks. So I think Calvin Kattar is going to win this fight with his boxing, just out-volume Arnold Allen, and the durability of Calvin Kattar and the stamina of Calvin Kattar is going to be too much. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, and I will see you in the next video.